Hi, credit union friends. Welcome to the BD Now channel. Today is a special episode for me because it is May of 2024, and 15 years ago, I started my business, JRF Consulting Services. And I've invited someone very special to me to join us today. Back 15 years ago, when I was thinking about starting, well, I wasn't thinking about starting my own business. Actually, a credit union called me to ask me to do some training with their branch managers, Wana Federal Credit Union in Oregon. And I thought, okay, I was between jobs trying to find myself, those moments. And I called my good friend, Denise Wymore, who I had worked with at First Tech, and I asked her, should I do this for a job? And she said, heck yes. Well, kind of heck, another word, but starts with H. And so I'm thrilled to have Denise here, and we're going to have just a little discussion today about life, credit unions, and our journey together. Hi, Denise.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me on your 15. I can't believe it's been that long ago. Wow, that's amazing. And congratulations. I had no doubt that this would be incredibly successful. And I love the whole BD Now series. I've been watching all the episodes, and so I'm honored to be part of this. But it's funny because I do remember that 15 years ago. I also remember when we first met, because Julie and I got to tell you, Julie and I met at First Tech Credit Union. She was business development. I became the VP of marketing. And First Tech originally was Tektronix Employees Credit Union. And at their peak, Tektronix had, I think, 20,000 employees globally. And then they started to whittle down staff. And Tom Sargent, God rest his soul, one of the greatest visionaries, but he originally saw, okay, if my core group, my single sponsor is going to go away, I don't want to go away. So he changed the name to First Tech. And then he started adding only like high-tech companies. And that's how I met you, Julie, was you were in business development. And when you were there, when I came on board, you were already a legend because you had landed a high-tech company that some of you may have heard of. Do you want to share that story about that little company that you landed?
Yeah. Well, you say island. I was part of a team that landed it, but it was when I learned about solving problems. And so it's Microsoft, and it was really one of the highlights of my entire career was that span of time working with you, Denise, working with Microsoft. But they were bringing in employees from all over the world, and nobody would give them car loans or credit cards. And these employees were struggling. They were spending a lot of time, outside of work trying to solve this problem. And Microsoft had a relocation department, so they were working hard. No one in that market thought to really create a relocation program and offer them car loans and credit cards with their offer letter. And so that's what we did. And it's pretty exciting to see the journey now. I left First Tech obviously a long time ago, but now First Tech has a branch on Microsoft's campus. And that was always, I always thought how cool. I mean, we go on campus. I even had a Microsoft badge. I got to, it was pretty fun. It was a fun time.
And First Tech has stayed pretty true to the only high-tech companies, correct?
I think so. I think they've expanded out a little bit, but they do. I mean, they have actually, there was just recently an article about the relocation program that they have, and they have, I mean, done things with it that I couldn't have even imagined. So they've really made amazing progress with that program. And so, yes, but they stay pretty true, I believe, to that core base. And when I was building that, we moved up to Bellevue. Tom was a visionary, as you
Mhm.
mentioned. We had no SEGs, we had no members, and we opened this Bellevue branch right down the street from Microsoft. And it took us a while. So I really got involved with all the high tech companies.
Branch close by. In his mind, he was like, oh, they're a high-tech company, we can do this virtually because he's such a pioneer, right? And then, but they, to his surprise, said, where's your nearest branch? And the way he told me the story was, we had no members up there. We didn't even really have Microsoft. We built a branch so that we could then knock on their door again. And when they said, where's the nearest branch? He said, look out your window.
Yeah.
Right?
In the Trader Joe's parking lot is where we were, right?
Were
Everyone
you?
knew where Trader Joe's was.
That's awesome. So keeping with that, that theme, one of the things that I did, because I was self-employed for many, many years, and I bounced off from self-employment from First Tech because I found, Tom, in my opinion, and you were doing it right, right? Tektronix was going away, had to expand field of membership, but you stayed with that core affinity. And what I was seeing is so many credit unions were, after HR 1151, they were dumping their sponsor name. They were going to these really generic names. There's some really sad credit union names out there. They're just kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of credit unions named I'm not a fan of. But they would unnecessarily, drop that brand equity, go to a generic name, lives, works, worships, in 18 counties or whatever, and yet our market share is still 8%. And so, one of the things that you've been so good at, I think, with BD Now is staying true to that affinity, right? I mean, that
Mhm.
common bond, for no
Yeah.
better term. But give some examples of other areas or credit unions that you've worked with, because I know some of the credit unions you've worked with that have done an incredible job with almost managing exclusivity or cranking up that notion that this isn't for everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. One that comes to mind is the Pan American Health Organization Credit Union, PAHO, WHO,
Mhm.
Federal Credit Union. They're in DC and they serve PAHO, but they also serve others, and I hope I get this right, that kind of make the world a better place, right? So
Mhm.
that's the onion. So you have the core group and then what makes sense within that. And I remember I was fortunate enough, Miguel came in, he's the CEO, and I was working with them, and he said, what I have two loves, credit unions and travel. And he's like, I know this is outside your project scope, but would you mind going to Panama? And I was like, the country? I thought, oh, I should act all cool in this moment, but no, I jumped up and down. But I was at their big meeting, and the directors from all the countries within the Pan American Health Organization were all there. And so it was a big meeting. And the director of the entire organization stood up there. And I don't even think I mean, we had a table, we were part of the group, but it wasn't like we were shipping out they were shipping out money to them. The director stood up in this meeting and talked about the value of the credit union and the long-term partnership. And I was just thinking, oh, they have cultivated such an amazing relationship with them that they have that level of support from the highest group. So, I mean, that's one example. I have many examples, but that's one example about really staying true.
Yeah.
And they didn't change their name. They haven't changed their name.
Yeah. And
I hope by the time this comes out, they don't, but
I know.
I know they haven't changed their name.
And it was so frustrating to me that so many credit unions felt like, well, one of my favorite clients, as you know, and you've worked with them too, was Coors, right? And
Yes.
when I worked with Coors, one of the board members went to a conference that said, I think John Deere had just had like were forced to change their name by John Deere Company. So his advice to everyone in the meeting was, if you have a brand name, dump it. And so like, all this scientific research, right? Just
Yeah.
dump it. And he came back convinced that they should dump the Coors brand. And they reached out to me. And I wouldn't do name changes, but I said, hey, let me come out and talk to your board. Basically, let me come out and convince your board that they shouldn't hire me. And what I discovered was that they had members that were lying to get into Coors Credit Union. And you know why? Because when they were Coors Credit Union in Golden,
Yeah.
Colorado is Coors, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
they had
Yep.
the Silver Bullet Visa, and they were the Coors banquet and the Coors logo, and it was all Coors all the time. So people who didn't work for Coors, who were technically outside the field of membership, were going in there and lying to become members. And the reason I tell that story is that's the argument for so many credit unions that said, oh, well, members think they need to be a teacher, or they think they need to be, whatever. And I would tell the course story and say, no, they're being polite to you. If they really want to join your credit union, they'll find a way, right? They'll find a way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we all know the great story with Coors is they did get purchased, and that it did evolve to where it made sense to change the name. But in case you don't know, Julie, tell the story of what they changed their name to. and how
Hmm.
successful that has been.
On Tap. And if you're not following Tracy Wilcox and her On Tap team, you must, because they have, oh my gosh, they have created so many connections with everyone that touches the brew. I mean, so many people in that area, the craft brewers there, the people that support the craft brewers there. I've seen it in action, and everything from their swag, their messaging, what they support. There's a group of women brewers, I can't remember, some boots, pink boots or something that
Yes,
they
I saw that.
support. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, they are doing an amazing job, really staying true to that. And one of the things in 15 years, I was really seg based heavy, and then it's community. Okay, let's open the doors to everybody and watch them rush in. That didn't
Mhm.
happen. And now we're pulling back and saying, okay, where are those communities? Where are those groups? How can we stay within one industry? And that's where you get, as you know, I learned this from you, Denise, the word of mouth, the power. It's how you're memorable. It's how you have messaging that actually makes sense for who
Yeah.
you're talking with.
I've always said that my definition of differentiation is something that your competition will not and ideally cannot copy. On Tap, I saw one of their posts. They had a bus depot that was basically a six-pack of beer, bottled beer. I mean,
So awesome.
I was so excited about that because it's like no one will copy it because it makes no sense for their brand. They really can't copy it. I mean, why would you copy that?
Yeah,
But that is the ultimate differentiator,
yeah,
right? And you
it
don't
is.
get that unless you get back, and many times back to your roots, back to your story,
Mhm.
back to your affinity. I follow closely the new credit unions that are being chartered. Sadly, there aren't that many. There's not a single new credit union being chartered that's 8 counties, lives, works, worship.
Yeah.
They are all back to the beginning, and
Yeah.
a very tight-knit community that want to literally pool their resources, to work together to help one another, which is really joyful for me to see. But what I love
Yeah.
what you've done with BD now is keeping, and I think it was kind of back to our first tech days, they're a huge credit union, right? But
Mhm.
they stayed true to their roots of, well, Silicon Forest. A lot of people don't know that, but in the Northwest, it was a Silicon.
Yes.
And we were there when all these companies were coming up. We were there when Nike was getting started and when
Yeah.
Amazon.com was getting
Yeah.
started and all those.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
you're
Google.
Google, yeah.
Yeah. I
And then
went in a blue suit. Oh my
did
gosh.
you?
That was like, okay, know your audience. Hello.
I didn't know, that's funny.
They had the big rubber balls in the
Yeah.
that were the bright colors. And I had this shorter skirt. They're like, have a seat. And these young tattooed people were laughing. And I'm like, oh, they're playing with me. Can I
They just
stay
wanted to
this
like have a
in
seat.
my heels? Yeah. Navy blue suit. Terrible. Yeah. What advice, Denise, do you have for, you know, so a lot of the BD Now community, people are watching and they're like, okay, I can't really change. We serve 8 counties. We serve, right? And
Yeah.
so what do you think for the people watching? What can they do to create those communities, exclusivities? What is business development? What power do they have, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the best. You're the BD expert, but in
I know, but
strategic.
I'm curious about your opinion. They hear enough
Okay.
from me.
All right, so I'll tell you when I would do strategic planning with credit unions, and they would bring me in for exactly that reason. They're like, we expanded, we're not growing, we've got this huge territory, and I would just deal with differentiator, right? It would be target audience and differentiator. And so since their target audience kind of went away, if they had the opportunity, um, well, let me see. This is what I had them do. The first thing I had them do is look at who the members are that are using you, who's currently using you, who's loyal, meaning repeat business. Ideally, they have net promoter score so they can look at promoters. But I always say, you want to protect your core, right? You want to protect the members that for whatever reason, and if you don't know, you need to know. If for whatever reason you have a group of members that are, paying the bills, that 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the members give you 80% of your profits. Who are those people? And many times when I'd have credit unions look at that, they'd be like, oh, most of those members are still from our original group. And so then there's kind of this moment of, well, if that original group's still around, right? I mean, there's sometimes it doesn't make sense, right? But if they're still around, is there a way that you can kind of, as I say, like renew your vows with them And maybe they've got shut out, which a lot of them are. We don't have that relationship anymore. It doesn't matter. If you can tell that story, and if there's something in that community too, and I've found this many, many instances where that company um, built that town, like Coors, right? Or there was one in Enumclaw, White River, and they were logging. This is one of my favorite stories. They were a Weyerhaeuser logging community credit union, and the mill closed. Everyone lost their job, so they're gone, right? But the first trip out to Enumclaw, because they were kind of, what do we do? And BEC was going to come into their market. They had merger opportunities. We don't really want to merge. What do we do? You've been to Enumclaw, Julie. When I drove into that town, one of the first things I saw was the Loggers Memorial. And it's one of the most dangerous occupations in the US. And people who died logging, there's this giant memorial, and they still have that logging weekend where they do the logging things. And logging built the town, was my point. And so even though everyone lost their job, they still had so much pride in being a logger, and their father's loggers and their grandfather loggers. And they were building this new branch, and we kind of made it a shrine to their history. And so that the community rallied around that because they know their story. I'm a big storyteller. I love that we need to tell our stories more. We absolutely need to. So a lot of credit unions, I'll ask them, do you know what your original story was? Some of these credit unions are 80, 90, 100 years old. And they may have added a bunch of segs, and they may have gone community charter. They may have merged a bunch of credit unions in. They don't know who they are. It's like an identity crisis. Where did you start? So let's go back to the beginning. Let's see if there's any little nugget in there that you can promote. So that's usually what I do. I don't know if that's
You
helpful from a BD
you
perspective,
are
but
one of the best storytellers I know. That's where I learned. Yes.
loves. Oh,
Well,
can I put
Denise,
a little plug
yeah,
for
go ahead. Yes.
America's Credit Union Museum? We cannot lose our stories. And Stephanie Smith, the executive director, has in that beautiful museum a section. All you need to do, if you go out to the website, you literally cut and paste from your web if you need to. Hopefully you have your history, cut and paste, because it's a virtual exhibit within the museum, but we're trying to preserve our stories. We don't want them to go away. And she told me recently, because there have been so many mergers, that she said it's always a woman that calls. It's never a man, it's always a woman. And she's in tears, and she tells the same story. Our credit union's merging, like out of existence. I'm the credit union historian. I have all of this photos and records and history, and I don't know what to do with it. Can I give it to the museum? And she said, I've become like the graveyard of these old stories, which it shouldn't be, but still the storytelling. Go out to the website, super easy. We got to tell our stories, preserve them in the America's Credit Union Museum. And we're fighting for the future of credit unions, even though we won't be around to see it. So that museum's not going to be all we have in 20 years. We're just getting warmed up.
And that is something everyone in BD now can do in our community is
Mhm.
find the stories and find ways to talk about them in your meetings with contacts out in the community. So weave those in
Yeah.
and, you know, have marketing create materials that have your
Mhm.
stories so you can use those specifically for business development.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, Denise, should we talk about why we're wearing these t-shirts? We're recording on a Sunday. Yay.
Yes. You talked me into going to this, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. So go ahead and tell about it.
Yeah, Brandy Carlisle's Girls Just Want a Weekend in Mexico every year. She puts together 4 days of music that is really life-changing, inspirational. And so as far as the social spotlight,
Oh, yes. We have
uh,
to do the social spotlight. And that's why I
yes,
brought up Brandy, because you also showed me what a genius job she does in social media. I've been following her ever since, but tell more about, because we do the people who do social right?
yes,
Tell us
yeah,
more about
she
Brandy.
does. And I follow Brandy. I know Denise, it's called Bramley. So there's a whole community of people. But there's two things that I think a lot when I think of Brandy Carlisle. She's a master collaborator. And that speaks to me and what we're trying to do. I think the more we collaborate, the better we all are. So more
Mhm.
collaboration always. She inspires me. And then the other thing that she does is she lifts up the people that came before her. She
Mhm.
shines a bright spotlight on them, and she really respects and acknowledges how they contributed to her success, her music,
Mhm.
her just ability to have an impact beyond her community. She's also from the Northwest. And I think that that's something we can all do is we can all help raise up those people that helped us get to where we are. So making time to acknowledge and send notes with those people, whether it was a boss, someone in the community, um,
Mhm.
Denise is, I mean, I wouldn't be here right now doing what I do without the support and encouragement of someone that was bold and just almost, pushed me to jump. So thank you, Denise, for that.
Oh, yeah. And Julie, one more thing about Brandy too that I noticed. Not only did she bring in people who influenced her, but she was also encouraging people who are not well known yet, right? And
Yes,
bringing them in. She discovered talent and bringing it back full circle to the credit union movement. Pay attention to these new credit unions that are starting. They are retelling the credit union origin story in America. And if there's one in your state that started, please reach out to them, right? Because I think that's a way that we can also support the new people that have gone through the arduous task. It's not easy to start a credit union today, but that's another way that, the whole collaboration and working together and the Bramley, right? I mean, credit unions are a Bramley. And so we've got to do everything we can to continue to really highlight that fact.
we are a family. And Denise, thank you for joining me on 15 years, the
Yay.
episode.
I can't believe you're 30 already. That's amazing.
I know.
Yes.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.